Gentlemen, I kindly ask you to get seated, get coffee or water, because we want to continue. We have a second panel just around the corner with like two interesting papers coming up. And I just wanted to start this kind of second panel at this morning. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Björn Siegel. I'm a researcher at the Institute for the History of the German Jews in Hamburg, which is one of the co-organizing institutions. And I think the next panel, the next discussions are nicely tied into the discussions which we have heard already in the first morning panel, but also yesterday at the discussion panels. Probably one or the other will remember some of the ideas. And I just wanted to mention some of them because I think they're coming up in the next panel, because the panelists in the discussion just now mentioned the importance of role models, the influences of power. They talked about resources and the impact of intellectual and social ideas, but also examined the function of education and learning, as well as the necessity of spaces for discussions and encounters, as we have seen in the three presentations this morning, the importance of biographical studies to kind of decode the history of the Jüdische Frauenbund. So looking at the panel, I'm sure several aspects will resurface in the two talks we're about to hear, because we're turning now to one of the role model, if we want to call her that way, Bertha Pappenheim, and we have already heard her voice due to the citation of two of her major ideas already in this conference. And so I'm really happy that we are taking a closer look at her and her ideas, and kind of studying her a little bit more under the ideas of religion, feminism, and the founding of the Jüdische Frauenbund. Our first speaker in this panel is Abigail Gillman. So thank you for being here, a professor of Hebrew, German, and comparative literature and chair of the Department of World Languages and Literature at Boston University. She's a core faculty member at the Elie Wiesel Center for Jewish Studies, and the author of, I'm just mentioning two books. Okay, but there are like more articles and published material. So the first book is Weiny's Jewish Modernism, Freud, Hofmannsthal, Beer Hoffmann, and Schnitzer, published by Penn State University Press 2009. And the other one is A History of German Jewish Bible Translation, published by the University of Chicago Press in 2018. And she's currently, or her current research deals with the Jewish parable from Franz Kafka to Edgar Keret, and with Jewish translation history. But today she will focus and give a talk about, and we see it already on the screen, to love your neighbor is to help our neighbor, the religious core of Bertha Pappenheim. Abigail, please come to the stage. The floor is yours. And if you can just put.
Oh, really? Okay. No, I want to. Oh, I want to put this. Okay. Can you take this? Okay. Sorry. Yes. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be speaking in the Jewish Museum in Frankfurt, a city I first visited in 1988 and have come back to many times. It's just a great honor. Okay, so this is So as my title suggests, my presentation will focus on Bertha Pappenheim's understanding of a three-word commandment in the Hebrew Bible, Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love thy neighbor as thyself. Great religious thinkers have debated this verse for centuries, and I want to demonstrate that Bertha Pappenheim belongs in this lineage of great religious thinkers, a title she would never have claimed for herself. First, a short Hebrew lesson. Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. The verse is simple, beautiful, yet at the same time enigmatic. It captures the best of what religion has to offer, but when you try to put it into practice, to pin down exactly what is being instructed, it becomes confusing. It seems to ask something impossible. When you look carefully at the verse in Hebrew, you see 3 words. Each word poses its own puzzle. First, ve'ahavta le. How does one put love into practice? Is this about a feeling or a behavior? This was the central issue that Bertha Pappenheim took up. And notice that love is in the dative case. Ve'ahavta le, not in the accusative, ve'ahavta et. Second, who is counted as the fellow, the re'ah? This is a common term for fellow, friend, or other, mitmensch. It appears for the first time in Genesis 11. It is used throughout the Decalogue. It is neutral but also pregnant. The main debate has been whether it pertains to Jews or to all human beings. Who is the re'ah? Lastly, the word kamocha. Like yourself, as yourself. In our times, this part of the verse is usually omitted. In my neighborhood in Newton, Massachusetts, there are many yard signs. And some people have yard signs that say, love thy neighbor. But they never say, love thy neighbor as thyself, only love thy neighbor. So what does that part mean? Is kamocha an adjective modifying the re'ah, or an adverb modifying love? Should the word be translated as love them as you love yourself, or love the neighbor, they are like you? And 2 other puzzles, which we won't really go into. One is if you look at the verse and the words in context of how they relate to the first part of the verse about revenge and bearing a grudge. And also a later verse, a few lines down, which is about loving the stranger, the ger, in German Gastsasse. And it says, you shall love the ger as yourself. Love each ger as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. You were gerim. So then how does that modify our understanding of who the re'ah is? And this is a big topic. Some translations. In these English translations, you see that the translators used parentheses, which is always a sign that really they don't really know what the verse means. Many German Jewish Bibles, including those of Mendelssohn, Zunz, and Hirsch, adopted Luther's translation of the term Nächster, for nearest, Nächster, for the re'ah. But that's not in the Vulgate or in the Septuagint. In other words, Nächster is a superlative, the nearest. And this created problems for Jews. It enabled Christian exegetes to accuse the Jews of only loving Jews and then appropriating Menschenliebe for Christianity. The verse has been subject to debates going back to the 1st century. And I'll share 2 of these disputes, the oldest ones. One of the oldest ones is that of Hillel and Shammai. A Gentile came to Shammai and said, convert me on condition that you teach me the entire Torah while I am standing on 1 foot. Shammai pushed him away. The man then went to Hillel. Hillel converted him and said, what is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow. That is the entire Torah. The rest is interpretation. Go study. By stating it in the negative, don't do what is hateful to you, don't do to others, Hillel made the principle much easier to understand, but he also limited it. Rabbi Akiva famously stated that this verse is the fundamental principle of the Torah, klal gadol. But another rabbi, Ben Azai, disagreed. He said it cannot be a fundamental principle because it is too subjective. If you don't love yourself, how will you be able to love a neighbor? And this was also a concern of Pappenheim, who reflected, as we'll see, on how her experience of not having a neighbor and of being a neighbor affected how she put the verse into practice and understood it. Instead, Ben Azai proposed a better principle, being the principle that every human being is created in God's image. So every Jewish thinker has wrestled with this enigma, and you see these disputes. And one more, which is relevant today. The German Jewish philosopher Hermann Cohen wrote in 1894, "Neighbor love is not only the great problem of ethics, it is the most difficult task of all religions." And Cohen wrote several essays to explain why that is the case. By his lifetime, also Bertha's lifetime, the verse had been appropriated by Christian Bible scholars such as Franz Delitzsch, and Cohen was fighting back. In other words, trying to reclaim the Jewish understanding, the original biblical understanding, as being about loving the Mitmensch, loving all people, not just loving the Jews. The co-opting of this verse by male philosophers and religious thinkers was another factor prompting Bertha Pappenheim to articulate her own interpretation. In her essay, Die Jüdische Frau, 1934, very late, she wrote that neighbor love, which she interpreted as helping one's neighbor, was a mitzvah intuitively understood and practiced by Jewish women throughout history, gedankenlos. They didn't study it, they didn't know what Hillel said, Rabbi Akiva said, but they knew it intuitively and they practiced it intuitively. And that this prepared them for taking on these new modern forms of social work, represented by the Frauenbund. Those are her words. I believe that this verse guided her in a deeply personal way in the last year of her life. I want to share with you what she wrote about it in a series of letters in the summer of 1935 to her colleague, mentor, and closest male friend, Martin Buber. The letters are stored in the Buber archive in the National Library of Israel. There are about 50 letters which he saved. Of course, there may be more that were lost. And they date between 1916 and 1936. She was writing to him up until a month before she died. And these letters are gems. Buber's letters to Pappenheim were lost in the war when much of her nachlass was destroyed. So this is a dispute, but a one-sided dispute. We don't hear Buber's voice, but we hear Pappenheim's challenges to him. I got to hold these letters for the first time last summer in Jerusalem. And also the envelopes were saved, and she had little stickers to seal. She talks about the Luftlinie, the airlines between Neu-Isenburg and Heppenheim, where he lived, and the Luftlinie of the letters traveling back and forth. And there were a lot of collaborations, but it was very moving for me to hold these envelopes. This is one of the signatures. She signed mit bestem Gruß, ihre Dogmatikerin. She knew she was more dogmatic than Buber. And this is the beginning of one of the last, maybe the last letters. And even here she's saying, Herr Buber, you're being very patient with me, even though, I don't understand. She was always saying, I don't understand anything that you're saying. I don't understand this discourse. Be patient with me, and I know it's annoying to you. So we can try and imagine what he was writing back to her. Okay. On June 6, 1935, No, the visit must have been earlier. It must have been the 5th. On June 5th, 1935, Martin Buber and his wife Paula Winkler-Buber paid a long-anticipated visit to the Heim, of which she was so proud, the Heim here in Neu-Isenburg. The three of them discussed neighbor love. And a few days later, Buber sent Pappenheim a short book of essays by Hermann Cohen that he had just published with his own preface. Pappenheim's first mention of the book appears in this letter dated June 12th. Yes, June 6th, June 12th, sorry. So June 6th was the visit, June 12th was the letter. And in this letter, she thanks him for his Rüge, his reprimand. And it must have been a response to her letter of June 7th, which I'm not going to talk about now, a very bitter letter. But the book was a gift accompanying the rebuke, was construed by Bertha as a gesture of Nächstenliebe. It was part of Buber's sustained effort to shape her and educate her, which she very much welcomed. So she says, Ich danke für die Rüge und für das Buch, das ich mit gebührender Zaghaftigkeit zu lesen versuchen werde. Vielleicht werde ich dann Ihrer etwas patriarchalischen, gemächlichen Auffassung von L'Reacha Kamocha näher kommen. She begins always with humility. She will try to read the book with timidness, the proper timidness, as of an uneducated Jewish woman, social worker. But then she adds sarcastically, perhaps the book will help me come nearer to your patriarchal, lenient understanding of neighbor love. And note she uses the word l'reacha kamocha, right, from the Hebrew. And also näher kommen, which is maybe also a joke, right? Näher kommen, Nächstenliebe. Pappenheim aspired to learn from Buber, but his writings alienated her. And she told him this right out. When I'm near you, I feel very close to you, and I appreciate you, but when I read your work, I feel very alienated because you are too lenient. You are too easygoing, Buber. So, but no sooner does she declare her readiness to be taught than she proceeds to give him a lecture about her own understanding of Nächstenliebe. And I take a short detour here. This is the book that he sent her in the Little Schockenbücherei series. And these are the essays that Cohen wrote about Nächstenliebe and the Talmud, and one was part of the anti-Semitism trial, and okay. And then I'm giving you just a short, this is one passage that Buber wrote to understand what was Bertha criticizing, and we don't know, but this was a passage from his preface where, in English, he says, who is the Reya is the person I am dealing with right now, who is encountering me in this instant, regardless of whether he's one of us. And then he sums it up, be loving towards your fellow human as to one who is just like you. You know the soul of humans because you are human and you also need to be loved, essentially. And this is kind of Buber's paraphrase of Nächstenliebe in the preface of the book by Cohen. But I'm going to skip Cohen's ideas right now. I do have 2 slides about it, but because it's, you know, not really so relevant. Interesting, but not so relevant in this short time. So I'll read in English. This is how she goes on to write to him. And she says, to an observing Geher, stranger, resident alien, Gastsassen, whom I think is referring to Hermann Cohen here, it may seem odd that a man preaches leniency and a woman demands severity, but it's very simple. A woman's love is more all-encompassing. She is supposed to be the creator or the shaper of life through the hurt and the pain. She has to bring forth the re'ah, or take hold of him, to shape him with unfailing love. She has to guide, to exhort, to purposefully develop the divine seeds. A difficult, strenuous work. destiny. Pappenheim's use of the word Gastsasse, which is the same word that Buber and Cohen used to translate the word ger, the stranger, in Leviticus 19:33, is humorously designates the male onlookers to her thinking. You are Gastsassen in my territory. Men like Buber and Cohen, observing from the outside, will find it hard to understand the feminine sphere, the female body, motherhood, and the fact that her feminist understanding of neighbor love is more severe than their own. Whereas Buber used the encounter or the Begegnung as a paradigm, Pappenheim's paradigm is the painful experience of birth, maternity, and religious child rearing. In her view, the one who raises a child best understands what it means to love the neighbor. And she continues, the man loves painlessly, schmerzlos, casually. He is not connected to creation through pain. He does not bear the weight of responsibility to create the next generation. He speaks. The woman is supposed to act. That's why she received 2 hands from the Creator, one firm, one gentle. The resident guest, the Gastsasse, flüchtige Gastsasse, who I think is Buber, kann gar nicht merken, welche sie jeweils gebraucht. Der Posheterea fühlt es. And she is the Posheterea, the simple, the Poshet means simple, the simple neighbor. So these generalizations about male and female love, which may have been written to counter Buber's preface, recur throughout the letters, and they clearly shape her understanding of this mitzvah. A man's love is easy without commitment, but God gives women 2 hands. A woman's love is expressed in deeds and words. It is a 2-handed love, strict and lenient. And sort of to paraphrase Professor Buber, it may be impossible for a scholar like you to appreciate the demands of being a female caregiver, a female educator, or why that reality shapes my simple worldview, der Posheterea. She is the Posheterea to Buber. And I wanted to bring a quote from a book by Mara Benjamin called The Obligated Self. Mara uses the image of maternity and caring for children, and saying, what if this is the paradigm for being commanded, for commandedness in Judaism? And she sees it as a dialectical experience, that it's obligation and agency always when you're caring for a child. And it's not a singular experience, it's always a mixed experience, a multiple experience, a dialectical experience of being tethered to a child. In a letter the next day, Pappenheim continues in this incredulous tone. And she starts out again saying, you know, I really didn't understand anything in that book you sent me. And she says, she refers to herself as dumm. But she says, even so, people who are dumb should be able to experience loving the highest and the nearest. This idea belongs to everyone. Okay, it should not be turned into some kind of remote, ice-cold abstraction that negates our life experience. And then in the same letter, she introduces 2 new ideas, and also repeats some ideas that she had mentioned in earlier letters. And I have the German and the English. I'll read the English. I love the highest and the nearest, just as I hate their opponents and enemies every day, every hour. I would like to make this love and hate accessible to all, to implant it. That is neighbor love, and an educational goal. The methods of that education are many. This is a motif throughout her work. Erziehung. Erziehung is one of the most important concepts for Pappenheim, how she understood her work. And then this is just something I put in to make the slides more realia, but something she wrote about Erziehung. I think this might have been in one of the last issues of the Frauenbund Blätter. Erzieher, educators should be like priests in a folk. Their office is a calling. They are in service. And she also wrote somewhere that we don't have Erzieher nowadays, only Verzieher. And Moses was the original Erzieher for her. And she continues, and, you know, again, probably you're not going to tolerate my inadequate ideas and make fun of them, but I will not let something so simple, so true, so heartwarming become so complicated. And then this extraordinary line of humility, maybe so much in my own life's way is simply self-explanatory, selbstverständlich, because I am alone, weil ich so alleine bin und immer war. Und niemand und kein Nächster mein Dasein kompliziert hat. And really, she's taking, it's not just moving that she's reflecting on maybe being a single woman, never married, but she's taking the verse to heart, because loving your neighbor as yourself is reflexive. It has that component of your own experience is relevant, and she's reflecting on that. So moving. We'll talk quickly about one more letter, the last letter. 2 days later, in this powerful letter, she interweaves the themes of previous letters with moving reflections on her friendship, and she refers to herself as Buber's near one in his terms. This letter contains very bold statements about what this mitzvah is, and it's not just love as a feeling, but helping. I think I'll just, instead of giving you my sort of gloss of it, read the letter, let you hear her voice. And naturally, this is a harsh letter, so be prepared. Naturally, I will help anyone who needs help. I won't fail to do that. But that doesn't mean that I love them. I could hate and despise someone and still help them, but not love them. Love is something individual, and I am an individual. I had always hoped that someone would help me. No one helped me. And then she comes up with this concept of warm hatred. Okay, I refuse to renounce my warm hatred. I hate the rabbis who position women as God's inferior creatures. I hate the Zionists who want to build a country politically without honor and justice. I hate the officials of the Gemeinde and organizations who cloak themselves in ethics and are getting rich off the Schnepfen-Kartell. I have no idea what that means. I can only guess what maybe someone here knows what it means. Schnepfen-Kartell. Schnepfen-Kartell. Fett werden. Schnepfen. Oh, is it the yeah.
Schnepfen, I always think Schnepfen, old, grudging women who speak
Okay.
with one another. And now
Uh-huh.
a good neighbor.
She says, ich hasse die Gemeindeorganisationsfunktion, die sich ethische Mäntelchen umhängen und im Schnepfen-Kartell fett werden. Ich hasse die 33er Juden, okay, with their fresh lacquered tradition, and probably many others, whom I would help if they needed me, beistehen, okay? And then she refers here, I think, to the Nazis. Should I turn the other cheek and love those who want to send me away? Then to love, something I can't read, means to embrace, to lead, to hold, to pour yourself out, to teach how to believe, to give of everything which one has for the sake of another. Love which demands because it is just. Justice. This is her love. Der fordert, weil es gerecht ist. And then, in the closing, to my children, I explain the commandment of Nächstenliebe the way you explain it to me. Okay, but it's more. Okay, it is the hatred of that which is not worthy of love. Punkt, Gedankenstrichen voraus, der Schluss dieses so unmodernen Briefwechsels. And I think it's also very moving that, again, her vulnerability comes in at the end, that she, as if Buber were her, as if she, the older woman, 20 years older, were maybe in the role of Buber's child or Buber's student. You're explaining it to me as if I were a child, and that's how I teach it to my young people. But I know secretly that there's something more to it. So in conclusion, her contribution, Pappenheim's contribution to the centuries-long debate about the simple enigmatic commandment to love the neighbor as yourself can be summed up as follows. To love the near one is to love the highest one. By the way, she talks der Höchste und der Nächste. And Cohen writes a whole essay about this, how it's inextricable from your understanding of God, the neighbor, loving the neighbor and loving God. And she says it right out. To love the near one is to help the near one. It matters not whether they are like you in any way. Helping the other is not an episode. It is about forging their destiny, treating them as though they were one's own children, as if one's own future were at stake. And when one raises a child, one must make demands, fordern, and teach them what is proper and just, schwere, strenge Arbeit, Schicksal. Her letters also demonstrate a lively mind, searching for the right paradigm. Is it maternity? Is it education? She understands that it's a puzzle. How do we understand loving the neighbor? Is it like bearing a child? Is it like teaching? Is it like having a friendship or a correspondence like ours with hers and Martin? And we see her thinking evolving in her dialogue and letters with her teacher and friend. And in the final years of her life, I imagine that she drew upon the friendship as much as on her life's work in teaching, mentoring, and educating women and children to understand the enigma of Nächstenliebe. And, I think there are the tensions that this verse raises, and all of these, as you see, all of these come up in her writings, these themes and these tensions. We all know that the idea of loving the neighbor was important to Bertha Pappenheim, and so it's important also to know that she pushed back against discussions by philosophers like Hermann Cohen and Martin Buber, who did not take account of Jewish women's history or women's experience. And perhaps she could not help but become defensive and accuse them of being Gastsassen in her territory. So I think the fact that she, in these discussions, in this dialogue, belongs in this tradition of Jewish thinkers, that we can also think of Bertha Pappenheim as a Jewish thinker. So thank you very much.